Let's go and talk to Charlie. Charlie, are you on the call?
I'm here.
Charlie, could you tell us a little bit about Merrow? And you have multiple companies, so I put up just two of them up. If you could give us a sense of your business, your company, and what business problem were you trying to solve with AI?
Right. So the description of the company would take longer than we have time to discuss artificial intelligence. So I'm going to just, in a nutshell, Merrow is a manufacturing company. We're 180 years old. 15 years ago, I rebuilt the company around a strategy to manufacture and distribute sewing machines around the world. We built out a workforce in Fall River, Massachusetts to build sewing machines and market and sell them. And we now sell into 87 countries. In 2008, we created a startup incubator and created created companies that benefited from technology. And that part and parcel of that was putting in a cloud-based ERP system and automating as much as we could in the company to make it a data-driven company that could operate out of Fall River, Massachusetts, and do business all over the world selling sewing machines. Since then, we have grown into the manufacture of apparel and a whole variety of other things, and we now have just under 200 employees in Fall River, Massachusetts. So we're a rangy company that has several divisions that do very different things. We are operated and owned by my brother and myself, and we have grown by being good at manufacturing, but better at managing data. So our approach to our strategic value in the market has always been successful when we have been better than others at managing information that comes through the company. Up until very recently, that had never included using AI. That had always used our advantage always was in building applications or clever ways to filter, manage, or report on information. And we now have embarked on the next leg of the journey, which is using AI to be better than everyone at data. One of the interesting things about Merrow, though, that's worth noting, is that our strategy is built on growth. So I mean, everybody's trying to grow, but Merrow has very aggressively established itself as a company that iterates on new ideas and builds out new product concepts, new business concepts, and pushes them into market quickly. If they don't work, we pull them back and we try something else. But one of the things that is a hallmark of our 180-year-old manufacturing company is our willingness to try new things, push them fast to market, and then make good decisions about whether we should continue to invest in them or not. And that's I think that the biggest difference between Merrow in 2019 and 1999 is that this is not an old manufacturing company. This is a very modern company that is very intent on growing. So, that's in a nutshell. We have all the problems of a major multinational company and the footprint of a small medium business in Fall River, Massachusetts.
So it sounds like you have a very complex operation at Merrow. What attracted you to the Aible real-world AI mission? Because you were one of our first enablers, and I should thank you for that, because you went through the growth pains of the company when we still started with the prototype, if I remember correctly, and went all the way to our first GA release. So what attracted you to the mission?
Well, one of the consequences of getting good at recording data and building up larger and larger data repositories and asking a company to be data driven is being effective with the data that you're collecting. And what we found ourselves after a couple of years of building out a sales department, we found ourselves not moving nearly as much information into a sales funnel as we could, and we did it because salespeople were having a difficult time qualifying and closing a lot of the leads that were coming in. And so what happened over a period of time is that the sales managers and the executive team all tacitly agreed that we'd put a lot less information into these systems that we created because we weren't doing much with it. We weren't being very good at the sales specific information of qualifying leads and closing these leads, especially as we grew. And so I think this is the reason this wasn't a problem 10 years ago is that when we were smaller and I was much closer to each and every sale, they were more qualified. As the executive staff moved away, we were much more dependent on lower level managers to make decisions about what to put into systems. And so we opted to put less in rather than put garbage in. And so what drew me to Aible was the very simple problem that we were missing opportunities to define good business by being too cautious. And I wanted to change that. I wanted to see if we could use AI to help us understand more clearly where we had better opportunities to then capitalize on all of the leads that do come into the company.
And I remember we had this conversation, and one of the things that was important to you was the fact that we didn't need you to clean your data, that we could take the data as is was of interest to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in the real world, there is not a department in a company like Merrow that is cleaning data. It doesn't happen. We have a bunch of information, and I think we're better than most companies with information. But it is absolutely not within the scope of any department's job to be cleaning data. And I think one of the reasons why we were so late in a way to come to AI is all of these friction points that prevent it from being something that's useful, significantly including creating and scrubbing data sets. And so I was blown away that we were able to take data sets and move them into models without any cleaning to speak of. And that enabled us to use it. It was that transformational, that moment of saying, oh, we can use this. We can now use AI because we can put data in that we haven't spent 3 weeks cleaning. So yes, that was an incredibly important part of this. And I want to add, like, one of the in trying to build our growth strategy out, resourcing each of these departments, especially sales, is really important. We stopped being really good at it. I mean, we stopped being nearly as good at forecasting what we needed for resources in sales as we were previously, because we were ignoring a bunch of information. So part of our challenge was, how big do we need our sales department to be? Like, how many of these leads, how many of these opportunities are we underserving? And that was the question that I posed to you guys. Is there a way for me to look at what we have to better understand how to resource our sales department and better understand how to capitalize on opportunities?
And for the people on the call who have not seen the demo of Aible yet, I'll show you at the end. One of the interesting things in Aible is you can set different resourcing levels and get the optimal AI for that resourcing level, and you know what your ROI would be. So you know that if I cut my sales team by this much, I'll lose this many $1 million. If I grow it by 25%, this is how much more $1 million I'll get, and you can do that what if very quickly. So how complex was this to get going? We talked about how data cleansing was not that big of a lift for you guys, but overall, how many months of implementation did you go through? How complex was this?
It's got to be a trick question, right? With all respect, there wasn't.
Most people don't know; they haven't used it. So.
How long did you guys spend implementing it? I don't remember an implementation.
Yeah, so like the only. Go ahead, please.
No, so from the customer experience, and this is why I'm on the call, there wasn't an implementation, and I don't believe, and I want you, I think it's a really fair question for you to answer. How much, what resources did you put into implementing this? But from my perspective, all we did for implementation was say, hey, we want to do a thing, and we dumped out data files and we uploaded them into Aible and we started running models. So that was my experience with implementation. And go ahead and you can tell me what you did in the background that I missed.
Yeah, so the only thing we did for you that now customers have access to directly is linking AWS accounts, because Aible actually runs models in the customer's AWS account, so we don't have their data, their models. And you didn't have to go through that because you were one of our early customers, so we kind of did that for you. But the customers can go in and just put in their account ID and account name from AWS, not their password, in Aible. Aible sends a notification to their AWS account, which they have to approve in their AWS account, and that's it. So one click on the Aible side, giving us their account name and account ID, and one click on the AWS side where they approve our request that shows up in their AWS account. That's the entirety of implementation. And we designed it that way because implementation kills projects. The more difficult you make implementation, the longer it takes to get value, and most projects die at implementation phase. So, let's ask you your next question on the trick side, perhaps. How many years of data science experience do you have? Like, do you have a PhD in statistics or anything like that?
I was trying to come up with a clever answer that would have to do with meeting someone at a bar and what I would tell them. But no, I have none. I have no experience with data science. And I want to go back to your point previously, though, and then comment on this. The thing about Aible, in my experience with, and I've experienced using lots and lots of different types of software for different types of things. For it to be useful, it needs to be accessible, and to find value, you need to be able to iterate through. You need to be able to create experiments. You need to be able to quickly iterate through things in order to get to a place that's really useful. And if I could compliment, without it being too solicitous, I compliment you guys on developing something that I think is fundamentally different. It's that the barriers to using something and experimenting with it, even if sometimes the output is mud, you've taken away those barriers and you've allowed a company like Merrow to, obviously I'm joking about the implementation. I didn't experience one because we just started uploading data, but it was more than that. And the speed with which we were able to move data sets into models, look at them, dump out outcomes, assess whether or not those outcomes married to our understanding of the real world. Our ability to have our hands on multiple iterations of model testing to get to a point where we could deploy something it happened so fast, and it was so iterative, and it spoke so well to a company that believes that is how you create value, that it was different. And I think it's in that difference that Aible has created access to using artificial intelligence in a meaningful way. And to go back to the data scientist question, which is clearly a setup question. I know my business, I think, and I don't know. I'm not a data scientist. I did fairly well in quantitative analysis. I like numbers, I like math, and I'm a data-driven guy. But I absolutely am not a data scientist. And I can tell you that in assessing the value of Aible, of what it kicked out, I didn't have anyone sitting in a room who was critiquing any data science metric that you might look at. It was just me in the beginning, and I think, Rod, you remember this well. We looked at outcomes, and I think that the most technical we got was, does this make sense? And if we think about where you create business value, it's when you speak to someone who runs a business and say, does this make sense? And when it begins to make sense, all of a sudden we can start creating action and changing our behavior in order to capitalize and monetize things that weren't evident to us previously, which is the whole point of the exercise. So I like the question. I'm definitely not a data scientist, but I am a guy that runs a business and I know it in and out. And I think that where Aible will make a mark is in allowing data sets quickly to be uploaded by people who understand their business, who then can look at the rankings and the way that the data is being interpreted, perhaps the wrong word, ranked, and see value. And you by setting constraints that are real, that are appropriate to the business. It happened pretty quickly, and I think that we got to a spot in hours where we were seeing value. We were seeing data that made sense, and there was value to Merrow in what we were kicking out. And I do think that that's extraordinary. I think that that's fundamentally different from our access to that sort of software, that sort of analysis previously.
So when you were speaking, I got to admit, I was getting goosebumps because this is what I've spent the last almost 2 decades of my life on. When you said, does it make sense? I fundamentally believe the business users' decades of domain knowledge and understanding of their business is crucial. If we devalue that, if we say the data and the math is all that is needed, we are leaving one of the most important things for transforming our business by the wayside. And that's why it's so important to me that business users be able to validate and check and add their business intuition and domain knowledge into the process. And that, I think, is the fundamental divergent path that AI will go down. Do we go down the path where business users are empowered to use AI the way they want, or are we going to go down the path where a few models made by people in ivory towers will tell us what to do? I'm voting for the first one, and I'm going to do everything to my last breath to make that first part to happen. So you were giving me goosebumps. Sorry, this was supposed to be questions to you, but this was just so relevant to what we are doing. So thank you.
I just want one footnote, and then you take it away, because I know that you need to finish. I think it also impacts what we can do strategically, and so that the ability to be able to look at information in so quickly and iteratively allows us to test ideas that we have, and what my brother and I are very hopeful for is that over the next year, our strategy is going to be defined in part by us looking at data that we're collecting about things that we want to do, and using Aible to help us inform the decisions we're making about how to move forward. And that's very different. And I'm going to give you guys a ton of credit for that. The fact that we can think about our lightweight, expansion approach to trying things, making them successful, failing quickly, but making them successful. And that I think that this really is going to allow us to, it really will allow us to be more successful in many respects. That's a strategic change, and it's a strategic value that I think it's just as important that we can do that as the individual outcomes of any of the data analysis. So I think that there's a kind of a fundamentally different approach to using this software than traditional AI. So now I'm going to turn it over. I'm sorry if I used too much time.
No. This is the most useful part. I do have one last question for you, but for attendees, if you have questions, if you can please use the chat function of WebEx to send the questions to us. I have one more question for Charlie, and then we'll go to your questions depending on what comes in. And feel free to ask questions to me too, but it's better if you focus your questions on Charlie right now. I'll give you a chance to ask questions to me at the end again. So Charlie, any advice to the web conference attendees? Because many of them saw us at Gartner for the first time 3 weeks back. Time flies, right? It's been, I think, about 3 weeks. So they're trying to get their brains around this and thinking through what we are doing. Any advice for the web conference attendees?
Yeah, use it. I think that that's the, I don't know. I don't get anything out of this but being an evangelist for technologies that I think can change how businesses are able to be better and more and tools that I think really do make a difference. This is a tool that you just use, and so my advice is you don't think too hard about it. You throw data at it. You test your assumptions, and you can do it so fast, and you can get to a place to determine whether there's value or not so quickly that unlike a lot of other things, you just use it, and there's nothing else that I would offer besides that, because I think everything else unfolds in the use as you use the tool. And that's where a lot of questions can, that's where all of a sudden there are questions, because then you can try to figure out what to do next. But my advice is use it and see what shakes out.
Any questions from the chat?
Okay, Rod has one. Yeah, there's one question here, Charlie. Hey, this is Rod. So
I know you started off, the question here is, are you planning to use this across all of your businesses, or was there one in particular? I know when we looked at your data initially, you had the particular sales of the sewing machine line, but you certainly have more than that. How are you thinking about this across the set of businesses? Is it just for sales, or are you looking at other things as well?
No. I think that the use cases for forecasting, as we become rangy, and the use for forecasting in purchasing, the use for correlating a lot more information than we've done so far in sales to find other points of value is going to happen. I think that our business in manufacturing in the textile space, as we push towards instrumentation and soft goods, there are a half a dozen use cases that we've come up with for in the manufacturing of instrumented soft goods, in how we can better understand what's going on in the manufacturing process, and where we have problems. So I think we because it is so iterative, we're going to test it in a lot of different places. And I think, for full disclosure, we expect it to not be useful in a bunch of places, and that's totally okay. I think that that's what makes this thing different, is that we're going to use it in a bunch of different places and see where it can create value. I'm very comfortable that it's going to create a value immediately for us in forecasting. But I think we're going to have fun with it, and we're going to see where else we can find value in it.
You mentioned one term. I don't know if you brought it up earlier in the webinar, but I don't know if everybody's familiar with this. You mentioned this term, instrumented soft goods.
Yeah.
What is that?
So instrumented soft goods are the intersection of anything that's woven, non-woven, or knit, and effectively sensors. And so where we're building out infrastructure to support what is a new industry of collecting information around industrial, medical, or risk management products. Imagine a Raytheon jet engine, and we're building a wrap that detects vibrations. That vibration information is then going to be used to determine whether there are problems in the engine. You think of a gun case. We're building out sensors in gun cases that tell you when the gun case unzips, so that you can get a text message and know that something's going on, and you can action on it. We're going to be building soft goods that collect a lot of information, and then do something with the automation, or do something with all of that information. And we didn't anticipate using Aible as part of our strategy in working into this space, but now we do. So, I think that the world of building an instrumented good and using sensors to collect information is going to benefit enormously from what you guys are doing. But that's the space, Rod. It is technology and sewn or bonded product as a substrate for the distribution of the technology, and then the services that are supporting it.
Well, thank you very much, Charlie. Really, really appreciate you doing this, and look forward to collaborating with you. You said evangelist. We actually call you an enabler because that's the term we use for our early customers who are evangelists like you. So thank you so much for being one of our first enablers.